for people who really want to see the growth of the Web3 gaming space. We do this spaces called the Hideout every week. And we've been doing it now consistently for about, wow, coming up on like a year and a half. So really, really excited to have another great panel here. Really, cool builders, really great projects. So what we'll do, I'll give you guys kind of a high level on what we're building real quick, and then we'll do some introductions of our panelists, and then we'll dive into some questions. Spencer will take it away on that one. But real quick, our game, Legions 2029, is a hybrid between a hack and slash combat system inspired by God of War with a game loop that actually implements a roguelike mechanic. But then we mix in some RPG-like progression, all fully blockchain enabled in a free-to-play desktop game built in Unreal Engine 5. So that's a lot of descriptive words. Again, I think the best thing to do is watch the trailer that we pinned. The game is free to download, free to play. All you need is a PC, so you can download it either from Hyperplay's launcher or legions2029.com. I would definitely encourage you to do so. We have a couple weeks left on our speedrun tournament, so if you get in there, you can still qualify, still build up your character. There's still time. So jump in there, check it out. But that's it on Satoshiverse and Legions for now. Let's go over to Marco. Can you give us an introduction of Meta Travelers and tell us about what you're building?
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me. I'll try to kind of keep this also high level and just kind of go over some of the stuff that we've been up to. So I'm Marco, one of the founders of Meta Travelers. We started back in the summer of 2021 with the idea of kind of creating a property that could combine storytelling, comics, digital, and physical assets. So we began with a series of motion comics that told the story of an alien race called the Nibiru, which then led to the release of our first digital collection, which was based on the world of characters from the motion comic series. And then each one of the Nibiru NFTs included access to fully rigged, game-ready 3D avatars for our community in various file types like VRM and OBJ. And then we created a digital collection around our comics, which we gave for free to our holders every week when the new motion comic episode was released. So as you collected the whole set of digital comics, that would also make you eligible to receive a physical 24-page comic book that we sent out to our holders. And so that was kind of our first step in connecting physical and digital products. And over the past year, we've been busy creating a physical action figure line that's also inspired by the same world and Nibiru characters. And so that action figure line incorporates elements and assets from the digital collection. And we'll be launching 15 figures later this year, which we're currently in production on. And these will be, 7-inch collector grade, fully articulated kind of action figures with tons of customization. And yeah, so our goal is to kind of continue to expand the IP in, new forms and different mediums, both inside and outside Web3, kind of bridging the gap between digital and physical. And I think that kind of, helps kind of welcomes enthusiasts and collectors from outside the Web3 space, which kind of creates a great community and connection for digital and physical collectors.
Amazing. Well, that's covering the whole, horizon of different things you can do within an IP. So that's really, really cool how you guys are doing a bit of all of it. I love that the avatars were rigged and game ready. I think that was important to us as well. And, building in Unreal, kind of the future, I think, where everything is going. So really, really exciting to see that as well. Excited to dive in. Why don't we go over now to Thrax at Avagachi.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Good to be here. I'm from Avagachi. We are all about, so Avagachi is all about essentially these tiny ghosts that are little piggy banks that you can put. There's a DeFi enabled protocol that we started a long time ago, and it evolved from there. Something that I'm noticing, I don't mean to divert a little bit, but I notice a pattern is that NFT projects that started in 2021 and are still around are epic at this point, because they have had to create so much stuff. There's so much utility and things to do in all these different projects that I'm hearing. So like kudos to you guys, because I love hearing projects speak that are as uh, complex as Avagachi, because I'm hearing things that you guys are saying that are very similar to us. Like we started out as something really simple, or at the time it was quite complex, but like we had to innovate quite a bit. But it was essentially just a Tamagotchi, but blockchain enabled and DeFi enabled. So you could have Aave tokens staked inside, and then you'd pet it every day, and it would increase in rarity with your interactions. And then that blossomed into like a huge gaming ecosystem. We've got like 11 titles right now, with more coming. We've got an art ecosystem called Fake Gotchis, where community members can make art using the IP and then can collect royalties and can split that on chain with a publisher. We've got one of the most active DAOs in the world, which is funding like over $1 million worth of games at this point in time for community devs. We've got a Chad dev team that is putting out epic titles like Spirit Force Arena, which is like a vertical battle royale first person or third person shooter, and Gotchi Guardians, which is like a tower defense game. We've got Licky's Escape on iOS. We had Ghost went wild yesterday. I don't know if you guys saw that, but that's our main ecosystem token, and then we've got a whole bunch of other ecosystem tokens. I can't get into too much detail. I'm going to be talking the whole space. So thank you for the intro.
Well, yeah, I love it. It was great to see some of the team out at GDC. I've been a big fan of Avagachi since the early days. I kind of came up through the Decentraland and then the Polygon ecosystem. So when you guys released in those early days, it was a really cool addition to, I'd say, the early development of the Web3 gaming space. So big kudos to you guys for continuing to expand. I also love the DAO model for funding community-driven projects that contribute and give more utility to the IP. I think at GDC, I talked to the team a little bit about that, and it's a really exciting opportunity, I think, for community members and other developers to get involved in the ecosystem and have the funding, especially in a bear market, to create interesting stuff. So a really cool model. We're thinking of a lot of similar things within the Satoshiverse. So really, excited to dive in a bit deeper and see how we can continue to push this space forward. And on that note, let's go over to our wonderful host, Spencer, to take us into the lineup of questions.
What's going on, guys? So my name is Spencer Vogel. I'm the business development manager with Satoshiverse and Apollo Entertainment. I've been working with the team for the last about 3 years or so, and I'm going to be asking the questions on today's space. So getting into the format a little bit for today's space, we're going to start out with a group question for everyone. I'll call on someone to start, and then feel free to just jump in from there in the discussion, and then we'll get into some individual questions for each of you guys. And then at the time, if we have end, we'll jump back into some more questions for the group. And then for everyone who's here listening live, we do a giveaway on every one of our spaces. So make sure you stick around until the end of the space for a chance to win. So getting into our first question here, maybe Marco, you could start us out on this one. So why is true digital ownership an important step forward for the gaming industry as a whole?
Yeah. I think the adoption of, digital ownership will, no doubt bring innovation in gaming, so I think this could lead, to new types of games and services that obviously don't exist in traditional gaming. So, I can imagine things like quests that span across, multiple games. And, what's kind of interesting to think about with that is, maybe a rare source that's found in, Satoshiverse could be, a crucial for crafting, a powerful item in another game. So what that does is kind of creates an interesting, dynamic player-driven economy that spans across multiple games. But, within these games, you'd obviously have a lot of, direct monetization for creators, which is also great and opens up, new kind of player-run businesses and different types of jobs. But the other thing I think is really interesting is, sustainability. So you have assets that have, a lasting value that extend beyond the life cycle of the individual game in which they're created. So when I think about games I've played over the last 20 years, there's tons of assets that I wish I could have carried over, whether it's that I spent, hours upon hours, building up characters or vehicles or, kind of unlocking special weapons. It's kind of a shame to think that, as you put that game down or as you move on, that, that kind of just is over. So, when I think about, digital ownership, I think it'll open up the door to, a lot of those type of things.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. And I would agree with everything that you just said. I think that, I'll come at it from a little bit different perspective. I was an IP lawyer before I did this, and I think I've probably said this on several Twitter Spaces, so forgive me for kind of rehashing some of the same stuff for the audience that comes every week. But I think that there is a real value add from a digital ownership perspective on the infrastructure side, on the legal infrastructure side. And so I've always, when I talk about NFTs, whether it's to people who haven't heard of them or at conferences or whatever it might be, I like to describe their functionality as making digital items more tangible, right? Tangibilizing digital items, and I think from a common sense point of view, we can think of what we currently consider to be tangible items and all the rights and properties that surround those, and we could imagine a world where we have similar rights and properties to the digital items that we own, where right now I'm not sure if people really if this is very front of mind, at least in the gaming industry, but the rights that you have in a t-shirt for your body, for your person, right, are very different than the rights that you have in a t-shirt for your metaverse avatar in Second Life, for example. And I think that as we progress forward, people are going to start caring a bit more about their digital lives and their digital presence and the things that they're spending money on digitally or collecting digitally, and they're going to want those same tangible rights, right, those essentially property rights in those items. And I think that's kind of the consumer use case that I think we talk about a lot, but from like a business and legal infrastructure standpoint, there's lots of challenges in the digital space when it comes to licensing and sub-licensing IPs for items. Things like use outside of an ecosystem are very difficult to accomplish so I guess by that I mean, if I wanted to use a Fortnite item in, Diablo or something like that, right? There's a whole slew of deals that would have to get done. The terms would have to get rewritten. There'd have to be a partnership between the two entities. Those terms would have to be specified. The license would have to be reworked. And all of that happens because there's no kind of baseline set of rules that apply to anything other than the IP itself. Because at the end of the day, when you're in one of these ecosystems, all the company is doing is giving you a limited license to display the IP itself, right? And so what NFTs do, at least in my mind, from a legal standpoint, is they create this asset, this digital asset that's separate from the IP, that can reference the IP, and you can have your IP licensing deal exactly the way it would be in the physical space. But as it pertains to this other thing, this token, this tangible or semi-tangible digital item, you can now take that and ascribe a different set of rights to that tangible item. And so now, you have the ability for courts, for regulators to establish legal infrastructure that applies to digital items and digital things, right? That currently have been constructed for physical things. And having spent 6 years as a lawyer and then a year working for a judge, if nothing else, what I learned is that the regulators and the judges love to do the least amount of work possible when it comes to writing laws, updating laws. And so if there is an existing system that can be extended, they love to do that. And right now you can't, right? There's, for example, something called the first sale doctrine and I'll stop after this. This is going to be a big tangent, but there's something called the first sale doctrine in physical goods, which basically says, if I buy a Superman shirt, I can go on eBay and I can resell that Superman shirt and I can advertise it as a Superman shirt, right? And so it's an exception to the copyright laws, an exception to the trademark laws. It allows me to go and resell an item that I've purchased and post pictures and advertise it and do all these things. There is no digital first sales doctrine. So things like that, and I just give that as one of many examples of why we need infrastructure around digital items. And I think that NFTs finally, because of what they are and what they do, they give at least the potential for that sort of infrastructure to be created. And so, kind of from a nerdy ex-lawyer point of view, I'm really excited that we may be able to solve this major problem that's existed for 20 years with regards to digital items. But I think the consumer use case, right, what kind of the question was focused on, is the most fun. And I only went into the nerdy stuff because Marco did such a good job of covering the consumer side.
Yeah, I was just going to agree, the data sovereignty, for players and for people to be able to kind of control, it's like you in real life, obviously you have so much control on obviously how you want to present yourself. And like you said, like having that, is going to be the fun kind of consumer stuff. When you were talking also about like, there's things about just kind of like the trust in transactions that happens where I feel like people will go outside of the game to get something they want. But for example, like I play FIFA all the time, and it's like you'll see if you follow like a YouTuber who's like talking about FIFA, he's like, oh yeah, and click on my link to get more FIFA coin. So like now people want to get these items that they can't necessarily, either they don't have time to play the game to build up to earn the coins, and the game doesn't offer that, but somehow there's this backdoor kind of way to still get it. Or I know like in Grand Theft Auto, people were like selling their characters. They're like, if you have a level 100 character with $1 million, like, so like now like people will find a way to do that. But then you have to go through these like shady links where you're giving, maybe access to your PlayStation or Xbox account and doing things in a really weird way. And sorry, my alarm just went off, so I don't know if will find a way to kind of do those things. And so I think that's another thing that, blockchain will fix, is just kind of removing these like odd, ways of kind of navigating through games to try to get assets and things that you want, where, you can just be able to go into the open marketplace and be able to purchase those in a way that feels, safe. So, I was kind of, again, focusing on a little bit of the fun stuff, but, there's also the security and kind of stuff that I think also will be, a huge step up that gamers want. And, hopefully, that stuff kind of all starts to get integrated, in the coming years.
What do you think, Thrax? Because you guys took such a different approach, from the Avogacci in making, taking a concept that was very familiar and very cool and essentially embedding DeFi within it. So I'm wondering, what you think about the question of digital ownership and maybe the things that can be done with digital ownership. How does that take us forward?
Well, the way Avogacci looks at things, like Pixelcraft Studios, the company behind Avogacci, essentially, we're building part of the system, but the DAO owns a lot of the ecosystem at the end of the day. And the goal of Pixelcraft is to be able to is for the DAO to be able to evolve to the point where it can take ownership of the contracts. It can, take more control of Avogacci. So, like, we've always had one of our core tenets being ownership, asset ownership, like actual asset ownership. And that's why we're so careful about our Avogaccis. Like, they're actually on-chain SVGs. They're not like, JPEGs or URLs or anything. It's one of the first things that we made sure we could do was to get all 4 pixel art views of an Avogacci on-chain, which was a big deal. Like, it was very difficult to get them to that size. It's much easier to do now because of, technology getting better and file sizes. We can do a lot more. Like we can do VRMs and things like that now. But at the end of the day, like if you don't own the things that you bought, then why? Like it's not really yours. You know, you're just renting at that point, or you're, I don't know. It reminds me of like Web2 gaming, like CS:GO. If they decided that they wanted to change something or they wanted to remove something, we couldn't really do anything about that. That's up to them. That's up to Valve. But if the DAO doesn't like something, they can tell Pixelcraft, like, we don't like this, in the form of a snapshot vote, where all the people who have Ghost or Ghost as in the token, or Avogachis, or any of the NFTs in the ecosystem, all of that counts as voting power. So by buying the assets of the game, you're essentially buying a voice in the protocol, and that's like our one of our core beliefs, is that the player should be able to shape their experience a little bit. If they want to see something and they really believe in it, they should be able to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that governance is such an interesting thing, for digital asset ownership and token ownership, because it's still in such an experimental stage that it's sometimes a bit difficult to predict exactly how it's going to look in 10 or 15 years. But I think projects like Avogachii and Decentraland and some of the other DAOs that are trying to apply a governance structure outside of just funding things, right, as more of an actual governance structure, are working through tons of challenges that I think are necessary to get through to really have that sort of ecosystem flourish in the future. And so I've always been super interested in seeing how some of these DAOs play out, and especially the ones that are able to persist, because there's lots of I think, like I said, there's lots of challenges, but I also think that once it's refined, it can be a really great system for building an ecosystem. And I think that if no one experiments, if no one takes those risks, we'll never get to a point where we have governance models that work and decentralized governance models that work. I was in the Decentraland case, for example. I think the challenges were very tough in the early days of trying to create a fair system. And we saw that hurt the project a little bit, but eventually, with a lot of refinement, it worked out, and it's becoming a much better system. Go ahead, guys.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on that. Like, anytime that you're doing something that hasn't been done before, you're always going to run into those teething problems that are going to, slow your project down or whatever. But you're innovating. So, like, one of the things that Avogachii pioneered essentially is the diamond contract. Like, the diamond contract is made by Nick Mudgeon. He was one of our very early OG advisors, and he helped us out with that. And now that is like an Ethereum standard. You know what I mean? So that just because something's difficult, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try it anyway, because this is the only time that we're going to be able to. And what you said earlier about the infrastructure being like that being there allows for crossplay and things like that. That's essentially what we're doing. Like, we have quite a large ecosystem, and what we're trying to do is essentially test out like a closed, smaller version of this, where we're doing interoperability between games using our wearables or our tokens, or, for example, like badges in games, which is a new feature that's coming with the player profiles. You'll be able to like earn a badge in Spirit Force Arena, for example. And then if, like, for example, I'm building another game called Mechagachis, which is a mech first-person shooter. And I could make it that if you unlocked like a top-tier badge in Spirit Force Arena, it would unlock a secret level that only the top players could play. And then if you played that, you could earn a wearable that's the only way that you can get that wearable. So it's like really exciting ways to play with interoperability that we haven't really been able to before.
Amazing. Yeah, I love it. And it's cool to see how you guys keep innovating, and I'm going to keep watching, because there's a lot of cool stuff that you guys are experimenting with.
Awesome. Well, moving the conversation along here into some individual questions here. Thrax, we'll actually go with you first. So, Avagachi is building its own dedicated L3 for its gaming ecosystem that uses base as its settlement layer. And I was wondering if you could tell us what you think are the advantages and disadvantages that you see for gaming projects building out their own dedicated chains or subnets.
Yeah, that's a huge question, but so I'm going to start with the disadvantages. I think disadvantages, a lot of people worry about things like fragmented liquidity or fragmentation of user base, things like that, which I totally understand. But projects can obviously take it upon themselves to build bridges and facilitate that process. And the other thing is that there's quite a bit of an overhead, to develop something like this on an L3. Like it's not like we're just plugging into Polygon or whatever. But thankfully we have quite a Chad dev team behind us, so that's great. And then the other thing is like it's more complex. Like it's not the same as like there's no real like it's the same thing. We're pioneering. We're coming and doing this first. There's no documentation for us to follow. There's no trendsetters that we can ask for advice, things like that. So that does make it a little bit more difficult. But having said that, moving to an L3, we have unlimited scalability. We can scale independently without being affected by like congestion or limitations of the chain that we're on. We can use our ecosystem token as gas, which is fantastic for the token. It's fantastic for the people that have invested in the ecosystem, and we can control the gas much better, so it'll be way cheaper. We can do a lot more like customization, control, like features and functions that would cater to us specifically, more seamless and engaging UX, basically. Like we wouldn't need a signature per thing. We could batch transactions. We could do whatever we wanted on a blockchain level, basically. And then the other thing is ecosystem growth. We want to be able to develop more games, more tools. So if anything we can do to increase visibility and attract more talent to Avagachi, we're happy doing that. Because at the end of the day, Avagachi, the beautiful thing about it is it's like this weird hydra with so many different aspects to the ecosystem that anyone can jump in and either like you can find the opportunity, basically, whether you're a dev or a gamer or an artist or whatever.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you guys are giving a lot of flexibility to, both your team and then also to all the people that are building your ecosystem. So, yeah, it is a little bit of an unpaved road, but appreciate you guys paving that road for us and, proving out whether or not the model works. So moving on to Marco here. So Meta Travelers uses comics as its medium to paint the story for its world. Why do you think comics are such an effective tool for storytelling?
Yeah, first and foremost, I think comics are just a beautiful art form. I've always loved them growing up, so I kind of have a soft spot for it. And our world is set in a sci-fi, fantasy universe. So for our particular story, I thought it made a lot of sense. Generally speaking, I think comics also, do things like break down, language barriers, because you can tell such a rich story with visual elements and, really use minimal or no text. And so that's kind of nice, kind of makes it more accessible. And also the element of interpreting visuals, where your brain kind of fills in the action between panels. So I think that's kind of an immersive experience. We've had the pleasure to team up with some really talented artists and story writers. Andy Lanning is the lead writer for the Meta Travelers comics. Andy wrote the original Guardians of the Galaxy comics for Marvel, so all of his stories were the source material for the movies. We're also working with Ant Williams and Todd Knock, who have been drawing comics for Marvel and DC for the last 20 years. So being able to kind of take our story and kind of put it in their hands, we felt really good about where they would be able to help build a richness to our story and the kind of universe that we want to build. We've been building out story around the Nibiru, and that was just really kind of the beginning of where we would like to expand upon and kind of create new characters and collections, whether physical or digital, and kind of expand upon what we've already been building. And we actually have a 64-page kind of comic in between a graphic novel and a comic that we just finished writing and drawing just this last week. And so that story kind of connects the original story that we created in the motion comics before we even launched the digital collection, and also introduces the characters from the upcoming action figure collection. So comics are awesome. I've again just kind of always loved them, and I thought for our story, it would just be a lot of fun to do. And the art is always a fun part of it too, whether it's kind of building the characters or working with the team to kind of develop beautiful art.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a huge fan of comics. I grew up around it, went to Comic Cons my whole life, and I think that it's such an interesting art form because you're combining, the textual and the visual in a way that gives the reader a piece of the puzzle, right? So it's not as vividly textual as a novel, but it also gives a lot more illustrative context to kind of lead your imagination down a path. But I also think that comics is one of those industries, the comic industry, that's had to evolve with every new technology to not become obsolete. And with that, we've seen the comic medium evolve into different spaces. We've seen DC and Marvel making their splash in the movies, and so the idea of gamifying comics, AR, VR experience, all within this comic storytelling, universe, I think is such a cool future for something that frankly has struggled, for the last several years and has become more of a niche on the actual reading comic book side, but has grown tremendously from a IP notoriety and users and fans, and Comic Cons are fuller than they've ever been. When little kids are showing up as dressed as Wonder Woman or Superman because now they've seen the movies and they may not have picked up the comics, but these comic stories are driving all of that. And so I think it's a really cool place to start. I mean, we also started there, and it's gives you so much flexibility for what you can do, especially if you're working with great artists and great writers like you guys are. I think it's such a strong foundation for an IP that you can then expand upon, and relatively, I guess, to other things, lower cost to market to actually develop these stories and get them published and get your fans something that they can enjoy and consume and look out for the next thing. And you can do it kind of in addition. So it's a really cool model. I think it lends itself very well to the digital space. I also think it lends itself very well to the Web3 space from the collectability and ownership perspective, because comics have a little bit more collectability, I would say, than kind of traditional books or movies. So there is more of a collectible behind it than maybe a DVD, although people collect everything, right? So I don't want to generalize, but anyways, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add, you're kind of like the idea too of kind of with the digital collection, bringing that community and making them part of the story. So we've kind of, done community cameos where we'll have, different characters that are, owned by the community, and they show up in the comics. So it's kind of a cool thing. You talk about like the evolution of comics, like this is where you have a community, and like not only are they reading a comic or watching a motion comic, but like their particular, avatar, character, whatever is in that comic. And so they actually become part of the story rather than just kind of, in traditionally you're, kind of on the outside looking in. And like in this way, you have a chance to kind of bring people together and, make them part of that story. So that's also just a really cool thing. And, kind of I guess one way that we're trying to kind of evolve with comics and kind of, bring in, a community of people that can kind of all feel like joint ownership of where that story's going.
Absolutely. And actually, I just want to do one quick housekeeping item because I forgot to mention this earlier. If either of you have a cool video or visual asset from the project, feel free to post it to the top of the space. I forgot to mention that earlier. But yeah, definitely love to have those up there so kind of people can see what's being built. And then, yeah, Spencer actually hosts a podcast called Comics and Crypto. So I'd be curious to know, what you think about this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously, very excited about the comic space and, and how it's been entering the digital. Our podcast, Comics and Crypto. Yeah, we're basically all focused all about, the collectible space, both digital and physical. So it's been really interesting seeing collectors kind of move from one side to the other, and especially through like Marvel releasing a lot of their IP through the VV Digital Collectibles app. Seen a lot of people who were never comic collectors or really physical collectors, in any category before, start to collect digital comics that Marvel was releasing. And, that led them to wanting to get the physical counterpart to their digital comic. And now they're big physical collectors, maybe even bigger physical collectors than they were, digital. And, I think we've been having a little bit of a harder time getting, more traditional physical collectors to move over to the digital side of things. But things are starting to move in that direction. Like Marvel and VV actually just released a new platform called VV Comics, where brand new comics, like contemporary modern comics, the day that they're released in the comic book shop in physical format, they're also released in digital format on the VV Comics app. So you can basically buy it day of, which makes comics way more accessible for people who might not live near a comic book store or might live in a totally different country and have no access to those modern comics when they first come out. So yeah, I think it's really cool that the things that are being done to innovate in that space, and cool to see smaller projects as well, and not just the bigger publishers getting involved. But yeah, all very exciting stuff, and yeah, that's kind of my quick take on it. But Nick, I understand that we had a question from the community that you wanted to address.
Yeah, no, I think one of the members of our community was just saying that they had been part of the Aavegotchi ecosystem a while back, and I think was curious about development of the UI and how things have progressed with the staking. I'd imagine things have changed considerably in the last couple of years. And I don't want to make you do a timeline or roadmap, but I think the question was specifically with regards to the UI and the staking to earn tokens and how that's progressed.
Yeah, so we kind of had like a rebrand type thing where essentially Gotchis evolved from 2D pixel art things to 3D VRMs, and we rebranded to reflect that. And the UI got a massive upgrade for the same at the same time. Um, but having said that, it's like a work in progress that is being updated all the time. So if there is anything that you feel like is bugging you about the UI or that you'd like to see, please reach out to any one of us on the team. You can see Goobs in the audience as well. He's happy to take any feedback. In terms of staking, we used to be able to stake for something called Friends, which you'd be able to cash in for raffle tickets, and then you'd use those at big events. But we sunset Friends like last year. There's going to be one more raffle for drop tickets. There's one more kind of ticket basically that's still valid, and people can still use that for the last raffle. But we're moving to Ghost Staking 2.0. DAO discussions are currently open for that. So again, like jump in the Aavegotchi server. It's we're like the friendliest community in crypto supposedly. So come in, have a conversation, let us know what you think. If you're basically, I don't know how deep I want to get in this because people aren't gonna know most of it. I can't give all that background info. So we have a bunch of tokens in the ecosystem. Two of them, one is Ghost, which is the main token, and we have Glitter, which is tokenized time basically in the Gotchiverse. So if you want to speed up a transaction, you can use Glitter to do that. And Ghost Staking 2.0 is basically going to be, the idea for it currently is that you can stake Ghost for Glitter, and you can modulate your position using glitter. So you would get an NFT representation of your position, which you could keep or cash out when you decide to, or you can actually take that NFT and then sell your position on the market if you wanted to. So we're really trying to make it an interesting take on staking. And yeah, if anyone has any ideas or things that they'd like to see, please jump in.
Very cool. And I love that. And I think that, as much as any other project, you guys seem to be very focused on building as a community. And so I know personally some of the best feedback, even critique we get is from our community. And honestly, in this space with kind of the place we are right now as an industry and where things are going, I can't imagine anything better than someone who cares enough to show up and look deep into the project and really voice those concerns, or even good and bad. I think it's great to hear from the community, and I think that's kind of just the ethos of Web3. I don't think any of this happens without community being willing to dive in and throw their support behind a few projects that they really believe in, and allow us to continue to work and function and build and take risks, because I think that's one of the things that you don't see a lot in the traditional gaming space, is, at least from these big AAA studios, is a lot of risk taking, a lot of mold breaking changes. Every once in a while something emerges, usually from an indie studio, that breaks the mold, and then there's a model for them to copy, and they do some cool stuff on it. But I think whether it's gaming or metaverse, we're in uncharted territory. So really cool to glad that we were able to get that question in, but also thank you for the response there. I know sometimes we try not to put people on the spot too much, so I appreciate your response there, and I think that is, it's great to hear. It's great to know people are interested, and I will say the same, and I think any founder would say the same. If you have thoughts about the project, good or bad, we want to hear them, because we're kind of in our little bubbles and doing the best we can to do everything we can. But it's you guys that we're building this for, and if it's ever going to succeed, it's you guys that are going to help make it succeed. So I guess moving on, Spencer.
Sure thing. So yeah, moving on to our probably final question here. Maybe we'll have another one if we have time. But maybe Marco, you could start us off on this one. What role do you see the large traditional gaming studios playing in the Web3 gaming space over the next few years?
I think kind of a little bit similar to where what we were kind of discussing earlier, is kind of leading the way on adopting digital ownership and adopting NFTs in a way where maybe even at first it's kind of more running in the back end. I know that there's kind of still some resistance in the traditional gaming space to the idea of NFTs, and maybe there's just not enough like education in the benefits. But I think that having big properties kind of lead the way to these open gaming, that I think that we all want. And I think that current games, and even a lot in the Web3 space, everyone's kind of building their own project, that we kind of talk about this open ecosystem. And it's hard to kind of build that way. And I think we talked a little bit about, no one's kind of created the foundation of how to build where you're not necessarily you can build something in a way that's compatible for a lot of different types of games. And so I think that the big players have the resources to really do this. And I think what we learned too is there's a lot of hopeful projects that came out over the last few years, where it's building a game is tough. It takes a massive team. It takes a lot of manpower. It takes also a lot of resources. So I think these big game studios have the ability to kind of really usher in this new model. And I think it would be really awesome to kind of see them essentially bring in more of that mass adoption, because right now, a lot of the projects are quite, smaller, and they're maybe, even if they're known within the Web3 space, but outside of that, maybe there's not a lot of traditional gamers who really understand the benefits that can come, by including, blockchain and digital ownership. So I think it's really on them to, lead the way and, kind of educate their, the players, their audiences, their customers, whatever you want to, kind of call it, that, kind of how that can be done, and, show them. And I think that it only takes one really, really large game. Obviously, if there was a Grand Theft Auto, a Rockstar type of, kind of company that, were to implement that, I think that would just lead into a giant domino effect where the benefits would just be so great. And then once people kind of saw that, I think the old model would slowly start to kind of, not fade away completely, but I think that, more people would, kind of jump in. So I think it's on them, as the kind of quote unquote leaders in the gaming industry, to kind of, have that progress and innovation.
Yeah, I could expand on that a little bit, and I think I'm going to end up parroting a lot of what you said again. For me, I think, realistically, there aren't any huge projects in this space, right? When we're looking at the scale of a Grand Theft Auto or a Fortnite, or there's nothing that's even, anywhere near that, right? The entire blockchain space, I think, has less active users than Fortnite by a large margin. So I think, when we're looking at um, what a AAA could do, and what it would mean for a AAA to use blockchain in one of its bigger titles, I think it'll represent a kind of tipping point, not just from a what could it do for the space perspective, but it will mean that the technology, that the infrastructure, that the legal rules and regs, that everything is to a point where it can actually be implemented, and it can actually be, used long term, right? It's a almost like a long term stamp of approval if one of these big games starts to put um, you know a blockchain infrastructure behind it. And I think if we wanted, I think it might be a strained example, but similar to how when the ETFs were approved, we saw Bitcoin kind of get a very different stamp of approval, because it meant that now it was on the books of some of the biggest banks and, lenders and private equity, everything, right? You were seeing all of the big players, including the government, becoming a stakeholder in Bitcoin, because you're opening up, pension funds and all these different things. So the significance of these major players getting involved and essentially incorporating something like that means that there is a belief in some sort of longevity, because there's a lot of risk in doing so. And so I think that, on the flip side, is why I think it'll be quite some time before we see a AAA, put blockchain behind one of its bigger titles. I think there's definitely research happening. As of years ago, we've seen the AAAs researching blockchain. I know I've had plenty of conversations with AAAs, and they are actively looking at how to incorporate blockchain, but it's not quite there yet. And there's been a couple titles announced from a couple of AAAs that could be these first experiments. But I don't think that those are not their biggest titles. Those are smaller titles that they're looking at as a field to do this experimentation. But I think that once we see it, right, we have the potential, which I think is one of our challenges right now as an industry, of reversing kind of the current narrative about Web3 gaming in the Web2 space, which I think stems from some of, and I won't knock any experimentation, but there was a lot of early experimentation, and not all of that experimentation was well intentioned. And I thought we saw some, somewhat lazy attempts at creating games under the guise of experimentation that didn't turn out so good for the people involved back in 2021 and early 2022. And I think that kind of had a domino effect in the Web2 gaming space, combined with, a bit of resistance from the traditional AAAs and gaming influencers, we had this rhetoric that wasn't very positive around blockchain gaming. I think what it would mean for, a Riot or a Rockstar or a Blizzard to put Web3 behind one of their bigger titles, even if it's completely back-ended, and maybe more so if it's completely back-ended, it means that the use case is real, right? And not only that the use case is real for the consumer, because I think, since 2017, when I got involved in this space, it's been clear that the use case is real for the consumer, but that there is a business model that supports an open player economy, real digital asset ownership that, major studios are willing to get past their board of directors, right? Present, consider, do all the diligence and say, you know what, there's something here that's sustainable. We're willing to put it behind one of our games, because they'll let us experiment. They'll let us, fail 95% of the time so that they can find the 5% that works. But once it works, there's going to be a model, and we're going to know that, that model has prevailed. Go ahead, Threx.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that. If we break down what blockchain is at the end of the day, it's like a value sharing layer, but it has built-in security because of literally what its nature is. So if blockchain technology continues to progress at the rate that it is, we're going to be able to transfer data the same way that a normal server or database in a game would do that at the same speeds, basically. So at that point, it becomes a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you want built-in security and a way to be able to verify that all the transactions that are happening are actually supposed to happen? So once that happens, it's gonna happen. It's not, Epic Chain and Riot Chain and things are going to become a thing. It's just when that happens. So that's why I'm super excited to be where I am, because that's the primacy effect. We're here, we're building already. We have the OG status. When people come looking and trying to figure out how to do things, they're going to ask us. It's not the other way around.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, we're coming up to the end of the space here, so I wanted to announce our winner here. Just give me a second. So our winner today of 5 Satoshi's crystals is Internet Phase at Internet Phase. Congratulations. So in order to claim your prize, you're going to have to go to the Satoshiverse website, which is game.legions2029.com/register, and make an account. Once you've made an account, then you can send us a DM with your username, and we'll make sure to get your crystals. And maybe, Nick, you could explain a little bit about the utility of the crystals in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. So our game ecosystem currently operates on a resource-based system. So there's no current ERC20 token within our ecosystem, and everything is based on ERC 1155 and 721 NFTs that are then burnable for things like upgrading items, reforging items, basically everything that you would want to do to progress your items forward. You have these resources that allow you to do them. The crystals are the key resource that you earn within the game and then use to do all these things with your items that power them up and make you more potent for getting through the campaign, but also the speed runs and whatnot. And so the crystal is also something that our avatar holders passively get airdropped or credited to their account. We have kind of a soft staking model with our avatars so that they can, so that we don't have a custodial situation with those, but those are also a different way of earning crystals. But crystals can be earned within the game, or we use them for giveaways like this, where it's a really good, cool advantage when you come into the ecosystem to already have a few crystals to play around with when you jump in. So really excited for the person who won, and create an account, DM us, and it takes 30 seconds to create an account, so not a huge lift, and then you can either mint those crystals or you can use them within the game.
Awesome. Thank you for the explanation, Nick. Well, we're at the end of the hour here. Do you want to give us a quick little closeout, and then we'll
Yeah, as always, I always think, oh man, how are we going to fill the time? And then, the conversation starts and we always have a good one. So huge thank you to Marco and Thrax. I know you guys are busy guys and, in the middle of convention season and running around and building, taking the time out of your schedule to be here. Also, huge thank you to everyone who joined and listened in. I see a lot of community representation, a lot of our PFPs, Aavegotchi PFPs, see some meta travelers. So really cool that everyone joined. For those of you who liked it, we're doing this every week. So feel free to join us next week at the same time. And we'll have another panel of guests and kind of the invite goes out to our panelists as well. Let's check back in a couple months. We'd love to see updates. We'd love to, hear what you guys are doing. This Spaces was recorded. So we will have, I know a big contingency likes to listen to these on the recorded side. So, shout out to all of you as well. But yeah, I'll stop talking. If you guys want to end with anything, if there's anything you have coming up, feel free for the shill. Like I said, we're just here to spread the good word. So please do feel free to close out with whatever you'd like. And then I will wait maybe 30 seconds to close the space because there's a bit of a delay between the speakers and the listeners. And then, we'll wrap up and we'll see everybody next week. So thank you, everyone. And feel free to close with whatever you'd like.
Yeah, I just wanted to, say thanks again for having us. Excited to see, where the space, continues to evolve. And, as far as, what we've got going on, I know I already did some shilling, but, we got some comics coming up. We do have, some action figures, doing a bunch of cool stuff around, the story world and things that we're building. So feel free to go over to the Meta Travelers page, check it out. You can look at the digital collection or digital comics. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. And again, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm gonna say the same. Thank you guys so much for having me up here, and it's been epic conversation. I'm so excited to hear about other projects because, like you guys said, I'm in my cupboard. I'm doing my job. I don't really get to see other stuff. So when I see something like worth its salt in the space, I really get excited and pumped for it. So thanks for that. And I just want to reiterate, I'm not gonna shill future stuff for Aavegotchi because there's literally just too much. Come follow the Aavegotchi account, check out our blog, and we'll keep you as updated as we can. And like I said before, Aavegotchi is a place for anybody. If you're a dev, if you're an artist, if you're just like a shit poster, whatever, come by and hang out.
I love it. Well, thanks so much. And this one's on me. I forgot to. There was a lot of text back and forth on the DMs to get this Meta Travelers thing up, so I missed it. So check it out. There we've got pins from Aavegotchi and Meta Travelers at the top of the page. Check them out and definitely dive into these projects because they're building some awesome stuff. All right. So
one more thing. Sorry, one
ahead.
more thing before we bounce, guys. Everyone in the audience, if you have a second, just bottom right corner, hit that little pill. Give it a like, give it a retweet.
I love it. Yes. Thank you for doing my job there and shilling the space. I appreciate it. We definitely appreciate the likes and the retweets. We wanna get the word out as much as we can. Rising tide lifts all ships. So let's do this together. Let's keep building and I'm excited to check back with you guys in a couple of months and have you back on and do this again. So thanks again. Take care, everybody. And we will now close the space.